What do a speaking coach, a strategy consultant, and a data-driven dreamer have in common? Sounds like the start of a bad joke, right? But honestly, it's all about finding out what people really do in their jobs. The stories, the struggles, the coffee breaks. The real stuff you won't find in a job title.
Welcome to a space where we sit down with people from all kinds of careers, have a laugh, and dive into what makes their work meaningful. Whether you're looking to learn something new or just here for a good story, let us be your guide. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Charlie.
And let's get
Casually Pro! Well, today we have such a wonderful guest. Chalsea-Blaze Chen is a data-driven dreamer, someone who wants to connect numbers to people and vice versa. Chelsea, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Absolutely. So just to start, can you tell us what you're doing and why is it so cool?
All right, that's a really good question. So daytime, I am a data professional, currently working at a company called Innotion. So we do lots of marketing analytics for an automotive brand, which is Hyundai and Genesis. But on the other hand, at nighttime, I really devote my time into really creating a community called DIMSUMX. To your point, I would like to connect people that into data and then get them into the table at the dim sum restaurant and then network together.
That's quite. It's not very common for people who analyze data to also have the people skill. Can you tell us a little bit more on was it always like that for you, or did you have some revelation moments where you realized how important it was?
Yeah, no, actually, that's a really good question because I feel like a lot of times, right, being data analyst, that you really head down, numbers is like your best friend. But then I feel like a lot of times, if you really wanted to get like meaningful insights outside of the numbers that you're seeing, it actually would be outside of the numbers that you're dealing with, but rather would be the people. And I think as I continue in my career, because I have been in the data analytics field for, I would say, close to 15 years. And a lot of the time when I do presentation, I found out like I can only analyze so much, right? But a lot of the storytelling, I call it data storytelling, comes from the context. But without being an analyst myself, I can only see an Excel report or a Tableau or Google Analytics, whatever you call it, to go in there to pull numbers. I can only do so much, right, dealing with the tool. But I think where the magic happens actually is when you go out to talk to different people from different departments. Like, for example, like people from creative team, strategy team, like account team. That's where you actually get the context, right, to understand, okay, this campaign happened. What do we do? Who are we targeting? Why are we doing X, Y, and Z? So the more I might kind of interact with all different departments, the more I realize that I shouldn't box myself, if you will, and really go out to talk to people. And that's where I feel like I kind of developed that sort of, to your point, the personality, right? Not just like geek out in my own office, but rather than say go talk with people and network. And I feel like it's so important that, I mean, just speaking from an analytics standpoint, I'm really highly encouraged that the analyst, even the data engineer ourselves, like get out of their comfort zone and then go talk to people that you work with. So that's where I feel like the magic would happen.
It's so interesting because I think all three of us have come from backgrounds that are highly technical and highly prize really concrete concepts and ideas. But we've decided at some point in our careers or in some point in our lives to say, you know what, that's great. But there is also a lot of value in the people side of what we do. Or maybe even something entirely different from what we're doing that involves people. I know for me, my biggest influence was being stuck in a room with three other people for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months at a time, and then realizing I don't even know what these people do outside of work. That was painful. Um, and so I really appreciate it when people take the time, especially technical professionals, take the time to understand, okay, the numbers are really important, but how can I make a bigger impact with the people who have to use those numbers? Can you tell us a little bit about, because you mentioned earlier, this group that you're getting together, DIMSUMX. What is that?
Yeah, definitely. So Dim Sum X is, I call it more than just a dining experience or the community just having dim sum, but it's actually a movement where like I like to bring people together through the universal language of food. If you like dim sum, join us. And I created Dim Sum X. It's really here to redefine networking because I feel like the traditional networking is where you go, at a conference, right? That you shake hands with people, exchange business card, and it's very transactional. So I want to make it even more like heart centered. And given the tradition, as you know, dim sum in Chinese actually means the touch of the heart through the deliciousness of the food. And I hope that the gatherings that we create at Dim Sum X to really help foster more meaningful conversation and authentic connections so that you really connect with each other. So I think that it's more of mindful networking, I call it, and rather than transactional type of networking.
I can completely relate about the power of food to make connections. Uh, when I think about the best events I've been in my life, there were almost always food involved. And that I can't explain why, but there is something very particular about sharing food, especially, I'd say, especially if it's food that people don't usually eat. If there is a kind of discovery in the food involved. So this seems to be exactly the types of event that you're making.
Yeah.
How did you get the idea to do this?
Yeah, I think as Charles was mentioned at the beginning, I feel like coming out of the pandemic, that we are so isolated, right? And then I think it was back in 2000, yeah, 23, I was just really itching, to network, but I feel like I'm kind of out of practice, it hasn't been out for lots of event, everything is shut down. And then also coming out from, the traditional, like I said, the very hyper focused transactional type of networking, I'm kind of like fed up with it. And I feel like, okay, what would be a new way to step into this zone of networking? So I was like, okay, why don't I maybe get people together to have some dim sum? And because the fact that I'm from data professional, so the first event I hosted, I call it dim sum and data. So it's really getting people who are interested in data and then come out and then we have dim sum and then we talk about different topics. So that's how it's coming about.
Wow.
It's really funny that we're mentioning why food is so powerful. And I take a lot of time to think about how people network and how to break down these like pre-made barriers that we have that make people uncomfortable with the idea of networking. Because most people, like you alluded to, Chelsea, believe that networking is a transactional activity, right? It's I give you something, you give me something in return, and we go on, so on and so forth. But that never benefits anyone. Uh, and part of kind of creating that environment for transactional relationship is having a facade of professionality. And I'm just imagining myself biting into like a pork bun and trying to remain professional. It just can't happen. I know I'm going to get it like it's probably going to drop or I'm going to get it all over my shirt or something catastrophic is going to happen, but those are moments that are real and those are moments that people can appreciate because yeah, you laugh, you feel a little embarrassed maybe, but at some point you're not this perfect polished professional. And I think that goes a long way to kind of connecting at a deeper level, like Jeff mentioned, because you can't manufacture these kind of moments of humanity. Um, I guess with that in mind, you have this really interesting relationship with dim sum at its heart. Can you tell us why you picked maybe dim sum instead of just saying, okay, well, we'll just have a regular dinner club, or maybe we'll, just all go out for coffee, something that's more traditional. Why dim sum?
Yeah, oh, it's a very good question. So selfishly, I think I think the question I want to answer is because being an immigrant, I'm first of all I'm an immigrant, moved to the country 20 years ago, and I feel like I've always been kind of shy. I would never be really proud of where I'm coming from. Sharing my culture. So I remember when I worked at corporate, maybe it's like 10 years ago, right? If people say, "Oh, where do you want to have lunch? Where do you want to go to have lunch?" I wouldn't say, "Let's go have dim sum." But 10 years later, I feel like, where I am at this point, I just want to be myself. I want to share my culture. I think I want to have people to feel the authenticity of who I am. And I mean, of course, I know the culture as well. So I feel like I can be me, right? To your point about earlier, I'm not like super professional. I think to a point that almost like too fake. It's like you dress up in a suit and then you like shake people's hand, but rather than say, this is who I am, right? And you'll be more open to me. So I think selfishly from that perspective, but then also with that, then I can create an environment I'm really comfortable and then share my culture. Like at one of the DIMSUMX me event or many, I will usually talk about like what dim sum is about, the history of it, and the story behind it, tea etiquette. So it's part of the experience. So it's beyond just say, let's go to a dim sum restaurant and start eating. But there's a little bit of an education purpose behind what this culture is about. So people know about it and be like, wow, like to Jeff's point, right? I learned something new about this culture. How cool is that? And and I think secondly is that dim sum is, I mentioned it, the meaning of it, I really feel it because dim in Chinese means touch and sum means heart. And dim sum together means deliciousness that touches the heart. And I want to create a kind of like a meaning right behind the brand is saying it's not just transactional, but it's about touching heart. It's about coziness. It's about us, sit in a very enclosed environment. It's like a round table and people really feel connecting. Doesn't matter how you slice the pie of the table, you always can have a direct eye contact with each other. So I think that's the beauty, make it why I choose, the format of using dim sum to connect folks together.
I really love the concept. It seems that you have everything here. You have something that's different because you're showing your culture. The fact that you're authentic about it is actually it's a gift for others. I can totally understand that it's something that you weren't very comfortable to share at first. I I travel a lot and I meet a lot of people from all around the world, and the richness is really in expressing the difference in the culture. Every time I go to an Asian restaurant, I feel like uh, I have stars in my eyes because I just find it so delicious. The fact that it's by eating means that people have more time to connect with each others. And there's also the fact I think that in most networking is not natural. It's not natural to go to a place and then just say what you do and try to find if it's possible to sell something to the other person. This is not a natural human encounters. If you think about your friends, what makes them your friends is that you share unique experiences with them. You say, you remember when we went there? It was wow, that was amazing, and this happened, and that's what makes friendship and by extension relationships. And it seems to be that you're creating an experience that is unique. You also give a purpose. You share your culture, and you. It's really. I love the concept, and where is it? Can you tell us where it is so that so that I can plan my next travel so to go to one.
Yeah, where are you located?
Oh, in Germany.
Germany. Then let's make it happen. Let's figure out make it happen
Yeah.
in Germany.
We're
Right
we're
now,
having it at Jeff's house.
yeah.
I'm
Oh, whoa.
very excited to have. a dim sum X at his home. No,
Oh
but
yeah.
uh, you know, I'm so curious because this is such like a an interesting kind of amalgam of cultural and personal exchange. And I just know from experience that you happen to have these in multiple cities across the United States, hopefully internationally soon. Um, how do you go about kind of bridging the gaps of all the different cultures where you have these dinners?
Just to clarify, when you say bridging the gap of the culture, you mean like per cities or more of um like what's the cultures
Yeah,
that
yeah. I
yeah
mean, well, honestly, kind of both, right? In terms of because most people, or if you're not from the United States, you might not know this, but cities vary from cultural experiences inside of the United States itself. For example, if you're going to have a dinner in LA and you expect it to be like a dinner in New York, you're going to be fairly disappointed. Um, but on top of that, I mean, you probably attract a ton of different types of people, ton of different types of individuals from maybe different backgrounds, different uh, careers, and maybe even different parts of the world. And you kind of invite them into your own culture. But how do you kind of welcome them while still maintaining your level of authenticity?
Very good question. Um, I would say at the heart, right, that people come to DIMSUMX event. I think they are, don't want to say label them, but they have like certain attributes, which is amazing. So they are open-minded, they wanted to try something new, I actually have a lot of people that the coming to a dim sum X are their first time having dim sum. So and then I think they wanted to experience different culture and they want to meet like-minded professional because at different dim sum X event I do have a theme. That's where the X comes in. So it's not just dim sum, but X, for example, data, X AI, and then X, mindfulness or meditation, or even with some of the community, like with Beyond Connections, etc. So it's really about the topic that kind of drive people together, to your point. And I think through that common language that what we not just care about the dim sum, but it's X what we also wanted to share about, whether it's a professional, a topic, etc. So I think that's the two, the food and the mindfulness of that content that and then the connection, right? Like interacting with people, networking. I think those three pieces bring it together. Doesn't matter, I feel like what city you are, like people are really looking to get the most out of those three things.
So, in terms of kind of creating the content for this, I'm sure, you've had quite a few data, uh, I guess, dim sum X events, right? Uh, what are kind of some other areas that you ventured into that you found fascinating? Maybe not because you looked into them by yourself and thought, oh, that's cool, but because the people that came to your table made it an interesting experience. Like, because I would imagine something like a dim sum X, I don't know, AI, there's AI networking events everywhere now, but this might be a really cool chance to say, okay, well, we brought in an AI expert, and in the middle of eating their shrimp shumai, they dropped a massive fact that I had no idea about. What was your most, I guess, interesting areas you just delved into in Dim Sum X?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. I'm not gonna actually share the actual content, if you will, but I feel like sometimes at DIMSUMX event, right, to your point, yeah, we do actually have some AI experts at the table working at some of the major companies as a speakers that join the event. But a lot of times you'll be surprised that there's a lot of, I call it data, might not be publicly available that's shared at the, maybe newspaper or stuff, but we can get that kind of juicy behind the scene topic at the dinner table because those are not like, for example, you won't likely to share in the public. But it's kind of like the office chit chat, right? Imagine that would be where you get the content from. And it's yeah, it's fascinating. And the other side, besides that too, it's like things you wouldn't talk in the publicly. But then second thing is that you will find a lot of people have empathy with each other. So for example, I'm just making it an example, but I'm not gonna say what professional. When someone say complain about their job, and then this person say, "Yeah, I'm really suffering doing X, Y, and Z," and then you'll be surprised on the other table, it's like, "Me too," and then the third one over there is like, "Me three." So we're like, what's happening there? So it's kind of become actually like a dim sum therapy, if you will. I was like, oh, I didn't expect that, this direction. But we all feel like we're connecting. It's like to Jeff's point, right? It's like not just professional, but you become friends as well after this meal. You're like, that's fascinating. Yeah.
And it's the ultimate goal of those events to create friends.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that you have those experience where someone shares something hard and then everyone say, yeah, me too, because I saw it happen countless of times,
Mhm.
and everyone with their professional mask and everything is amazing. But whenever you share something hard, they're like, oh yeah, actually, actually me too. It shows that your events are very um, uh, conducive of vulnerability, that people feel um, at ease. On a completely different topic, or maybe not so different. Let's see. You mentioned at the beginning um, that you were doing data storytelling. So you transform data into stories. Could you tell us a bit more about the process and how you do that?
Sure. So just to make sure I've got the question right, it's like, how do I transfer data into storytelling, right?
Yes, or how do you use storytelling to talk about data or your
Oh,
insights?
right. So how do I use storytelling to talk about data? Yeah. So I think a lot of times that being analysts, we focus a lot on data visualization, right? So when we think about like data storytelling, it's really about the visualization and then the narrative and then the insights that what those three things piece together into data storytelling. But I feel like, the key part is you have to know your audience because I feel like a lot of analysts, they're very good at analyzing the data, using formula and et cetera, and come up with a ton of charts, eye chart, we sometimes even call it. But but I feel like we have to be mindful when you tell the story of the data and make it actionable. You have to know who your audience are. Like those people are not analysts. It's almost like the opposite. And how do you make it simple enough, right? So it's not like you come up with 10 pages of a slide, but perhaps the 10 slides of information can synthesize into one very simple slide. So I think that's where I feel like the power comes in is really to know that the other person is not you, and how would you tell the story to someone that maybe have no background in data analytics, and then they can comprehend it. So I feel like that's the key part is knowing your audience and using as simple language as possible to make the point through. And data, sometimes I feel like it has a lot of information. It can create a lot of cognitive load as well. It's like too much. It's like too overwhelmed. Like I don't even know what this KPI mean, and boom, there's another chart and et cetera, et cetera. So I think that the key part here is really make it simplified and straightforward. If possible, make it like into a movie, for example. I'm not saying doing that, but like as like a storytelling, right? Like I'm following the story rather than say like I'm following this bar chart, this pie chart, etc. So
I find that the pinnacle of your understanding is making something very complicated easy for someone else, right? There is such a power not just to understand something, but mold it into the kind of vision of someone else who might not have that technical understanding. Um, it is incredibly difficult, and I can speak from previous experience. Getting someone into kind of a crash course of a highly technical field. I don't know if you've ever had to explain a P&L to someone who can't open Excel, but um, a giant, giant pain. But that kind of value transfers into a ton of different parts of life, right? I think when it comes down to it, if you're not able to connect people to ideas, then you're not an expert in that field. And you can't really kind of develop that outside of, um, uh, just a really deep technical understanding. When you create these stories, are you picturing kind of the value that you're trying to bring across, or are you focusing mainly on the person that you're trying to talk to? Like, for example, if you wanted to uh express the importance of a specific KPI, are you putting it in terms that they'll understand because they know a specific, analogy or a specific story? Or are you kind of putting the focus on, okay, this is really technical and I need to teach you about why it's so important instead? Which route do you go? Do you teach the person the background, or do you put it in context that they understand?
Yeah, I think maybe a bit of both. So to your point, right? If it's a thing is really complicated, you almost like need to go through a bit of a step-by-steps educational purpose. Like I would say, okay, what would this R square means? And maybe not explaining a whole details into it, but rather than say, imagine, what would this be equivalent to? And this is what you just need to focus rather than throw them in a bunch of like numbers. They'd be like, okay, I'm not a scientist, right? They already get put off by it. And but using analogy definitely helps. But another time, what I would like to use is like a little game as well, if you will. So for example, before I presenting a data, if I have a two piece of information, say, oh, subject line A versus subject line B, like take a look, which one do you think is the winner? And you kind of engage them to start off rather than show them the numbers, say, oh, this one is increase X% versus this. But if they pick one and then they already remember, and then now you're revealing the answer, and I feel like they will get more engaged with it. And I think it's just a lot of different, to your point, right? How do you make it easy to consume, and how do you make it engaged enough rather than just reading a weather report chart, like this is up, this is down, which is boring, and people will not remember the insights.
It's a very interesting way to use to create a game to engage them to something that's related to the insights that you bring. So it sounds very abstract in my head, but I realize that if you can engage them, you're one level higher than understanding. We tend to remember more things that we somehow interact with or touch or do something with more than just understanding. So that it seems to be a very effective way to do that. I like also the fact that you said adapt to your audience and make it actionable. This is also something that many people forget to do, that ultimately it has to be actionable. Otherwise, it's just an anecdote. It's we know something, but it's meaningless. So you would rather have not tell them, because if it's meaningless, it's not something to tell. And also it makes me think that you have to know them so well, the people you're talking to, so that you know what is useful to them. It's very easy when you do some analysis. I imagine that you work a lot and you have a lot of different insights, but you need to know which insights are relevant to the decisions that take the people you speak to. And this is where the human skills enter in the game, because it's not just about giving insights, but giving the most important insight that the other person needs to make the best decision. I, it's amazing that you put this all together, because it makes me realize things that I never thought about before. So it's very it's very nice. Could you give us some examples of insights that you got from data and that people were, let's say, surprised to hear?
Yeah. Let me think about, because right now I'm working in the sort of the email marketing field. I actually just recently worked on an analysis, which is interesting. And it's an email, right? So there we sent out like two different emails to actually same audience, and it's kind of like a journey, if you will. So for example, you receive email number one on the first week, and then email number two in the third week. And but it's the same people that you receive two different touch of email. And when I noticed that in the first email, it's just very super simple, straightforward. You see the product of the email in a more of a gift format. So if you open the email, you see the image kind of keep changing, right? You see the same product, but maybe in different color, and you see the product. You're like, okay, cool. And then the second email with this show is that actually it's a bit of a video, if you will. So for example, you kind of like think of it like an action shot. So like a movie, if you will. So you open this email, you see a kind of like a blurry view, like a little dark spot. Imagine you have a flashlight, you kind of everything is dark, right? So you don't see things, but the flashlight kind of going around the image and on the people and then into the product. So it took a while. So you kind of like watching a little short video, but it's like, what is it showing me? At the beginning, it's just everything is dark. And it turns out the performance of this two email is that the more straightforward it gets the most engagement versus the other one. I think people lost patience. It took me almost 10 seconds, right, to kind of see where am I falling, what am I looking at. I think it lost the track of like what as a audience or shopper, why am I opening this email if you're not showing me a product right in my face, right? Because people nowadays they're like, I want to see something I want to click on because I wanted to buy X, Y, and Z that product. So I think when it comes to that kind of creative direction, it's fascinating. I think you have to think about not just the psychology of the person or the individual, but you have to think from a with an empathy, almost like empathy. I call it empathy. Like, how would this person, if I were that email recipient, I think I lost patience by spending 10 seconds here trying to figure out what this email tells me rather than say I open the email. The first second I see this email, I know what I need to do. So I think that's an example what I would share if you find it fascinating.
It's so interesting because it seems like, uh, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, you kind of find a way, both in your professional and entrepreneurial life, to make the consumption of information easy, right? There is a lot going on with an analysis in a particular area. You need to figure out how, does someone think? How does someone uh, get the information that you're trying to put across? But also in DIMSUMX, it's the same thing with people, right? People are highly complex creatures with lots of ticks and changes inside of them, and you have to distill that into a conversation that makes everyone feel included and valued. Is there kind of a driving force of yours that makes you so inclined to find and simplify the truth? And if so, have you explored that? Have you kind of figured out, well, why do I love doing the work that I do?
Very good question. Very philosophical.
We
Also
like to get
thoughtful.
deep every once in a while.
Yes. So, oh yeah. Let me think. Yeah, I feel like I think empathy is kind of the key, right? That to your point that whether it's a data analysis, whether it's an event that you're going to, it's like how you put yourself into someone's shoes that makes you have you almost like going through their pain, if you will, like if there's not pain or joy, if you will, if you say, okay, I'm going through this email experience, if I'm the person who receiving the email, how would I react to it? Versus in the scenario of if I go to a DIMSUMX event, how do I make everyone feel like at home, right? That make them feel them very comfortable. Because I like I said before, I went to a lot of networking event. I never found myself really enjoying it, rather than being who I am. And that's where I think creating the cozy environment and every little step of the way, like by the time they receive, RSVP, to the time they step into the restaurant, and to the time they put on the name tag. And by the way, share this very cute one. If you ever at a DIMSUMX event, we have very cool LED name tag. So you already kind of make it, right? So like, ooh, this is fun. So like you're, and then you're welcoming, and then when you do networking, I think it's, except eating the part of the food, I kind of walk people through what you're eating, so you're not like, not sure what I'm eating, should I eat this, right? And I'm, yeah, I think this also goes back to one of your earlier question you asked me about, um, what are some of the surprising things that I found, is that by posting DIMSUMX event, this also relates to this question as well. I noticed there are different needs of dietary restriction, if you will, because there's all walks of people, all walks of culture. Maybe people don't necessarily eat seafood or fish, or beef or pork, etc. And some are gluten free. So I have to kind of make sure I accommodate to a lot of people's need. Like when you have all these people say don't eat X, Y, and Z, sit at the same table, how can I make sure they don't eat the food that they eat, right? So for example, I will have little tags say this is gluten free, or this is vegetables only, so people know, and we let people know on the table, kind of watch out for each other. And then after eating, I say, okay, how do I continue to make this an amazing experience? So a lot of time at a networking event, I feel like we have to insert ourselves to speak to others, which is very uncomfortable, because if you and Jeff are already talking, I feel like I don't want to just say, hi, my name is Chelsea, and like awkward. So rather than say, oh, we're getting into our speed networking. Now you pair up with a person that we haven't speak to yet, and let's get started. So I think that's where I feel like I'm the facilitator, creating an environment that kind of walk them through. They don't have to think. They just come in here, just follow the step and enjoy themselves. And 10 minutes up, all right, let's change to the next pair. And I feel like, oh, if I'm going to the event, I'll be like, yeah, I don't have to like force myself to really speak to other people. I feel like that's where I would say coming in to really, how do you think about or design an experience that you would want, right? Imagine if you are the other person, how would that be? How would you be the recipient? And then you design around that. So, but it's a really good question. Now I never put the two and two together.
Design an experience that you would like to have. That's really amazing, and it seems to be the core of what you're doing, because doing something amazing is not easy. Most of the doing something is hard, but it's only the first step. If you just do something, it will never be good. The chances are too low. You need to observe, you need to reflect, you need to somehow put yourself as someone else and see how you would feel if you were in their shoes. Most people never do this. Most people who organize events never think about those things. They never reflect on their own experience, because when you talk to other people, everyone knows what it feels like to go to your first networking events, where you feel all this stress, all these doubts, and it's very hard. But yet, people who organize often don't think about it anymore, because maybe they did it many times. And then at some point, we tend to forget how hard it was at the beginning. But every once in a while, you meet people who don't forget how hard it was. and those are always the best events, you know. And you do the same. Yes.
Right. No, I want to say because you did talk about it's almost like an experience designer, right? But it's like you design the experience, but then it's also interesting too. I mean, the reason to your point is about observation. I feel like I'm kind of on the other side, like I said, that I went to networking event. I always feel like I don't get the most out of it. I'm kind of like left out, and I'm not brave enough to speak up. I'll go to a networking event. If nobody talked to me, I'll just walk, right? And then be like, oh, I just went, I didn't meet anyone. And versus maybe people are like, if they are the event organizer, they might not pay attention to someone like me, right? So I think that's the point. It's like, to your point, it's like, it's almost, you don't just pay attention to people who are having fun, but you pay attention to people who may not have fun. Then like, why didn't they not have fun? And I actually have one of the maybe like not speaker attendees told me he was like, oh, I was too shy. I didn't speak to many people. And then I say, come back next time. And you know, I'll give you a free DIMSUMX ticket and let's retry this again. So I feel like that's where I wanted to not have people left out. It's not about how many people attend, but I would say how many people leave DIMSUMX event with a smiling face on them. So I think that's maybe how I measure the success of a DIMSUMX event.
It seems that you got data and you immediately made an experiment to change it, and then you had a better outcome. So you use the same process in your events that you use in your job.
Right on.
Well, it's so funny because I consider myself a communications enthusiast. I think Jeff would say he is as well. And I've come to the realization that the highest level of communication isn't interpersonal. It's not, you know, trying to get your message across or understanding someone else's message. It's actually the facilitation of communication itself, right? Because you have to understand how people are connecting to each other and maybe how they're not, and fix that yourself. And it seems like that is a core tenet of DIMSUMX is figuring out, well, how do we make everyone at our table feel welcome first and foremost, but heard, right? I'm so curious about kind of what initially prompted you to say, I have to put a really big emphasis on making sure that I watch everyone at the table, that I am facilitating and not just being a part of this experience.
Yeah. I feel like maybe because the fact that I went to enough networking events that disappointed me. And I don't want to be a contributor to yet another or breaking another person's heart like my my heart is broken many times, so just kidding. So that's why I feel like it's very important to me. Like I'm almost like when I'm at the event, right, to your point, it's at being the facilitator is such a key role. And that facilitator like has to care, right? Like almost like no one left out that, okay, what this person needs, that, okay, the tea, water, it's almost like such a key role and to make the whole experience fulfilled and matters. And I think maybe that's the key. And I really wish too. I mean, this is interesting. I'm thinking about it's so important, the facilitator, almost like I wouldn't call it like your big brother or sister, but someone always there to look out for you if you were like by yourself, for example. All of a sudden I noticed like this person sit here, like, hey, wait a minute, like I should put that person to talk to the other person and to make that person, feel more comfortable so it's not so left out. And if I see maybe in a conversation, right, at a dim sum discussion, if someone take over the conversation too much, and then I would say, okay, what do you think? Rather than say that person keep talking for 5 minutes, which we've seen a lot at the office environment. I mean, that's how do we put it, use that maybe to apply it at the work environment, like vice versa. So I think the facilitator is such a key role. I think I'm really enjoy being in creating that environment of facilitating so that we make sure everyone has that same experience.
Well, that must be very hard to. Everyone has a different result on what they share when they talk to a group. Some people they just say whatever crosses their mind. Other people they just let their very best idea comes out, but then when it comes they're stressed and then they can they cannot say it because they feel a rush of adrenaline. That must be really difficult to manage in a group, this the share of talking. I wonder, Chelsea, if it's a skill, the facilitation skill that you also apply in your corporate job, or did you find ways to use the same skills in your job?
Yeah, I think I'm maybe if you ask me, I feel like I wish there's actually more of that, if you will, at the corporate environment. And I think, I think if you think about the facilitator role, right? Like at DIMSUMX, it's more, I call it how do I say the word? More equal, if you will, because we all just participate. There's no hierarchy, there's no title, right? Everyone just come here to have dim sum. So I feel like create an environment where we all feel very equally the same. But in a corporate environment, it's a little bit different. But I hope, I would love to see more of that facilitator being maybe rotated across different title or roles, because I think a lot of the time it's the department head, right, whoever is like setting up the key meetings and for that, except the meeting you need to do like one-on-one or a little group discussion. But I feel like having from a department standpoint, having a facilitator really caters to each other's needs, doesn't not only shed the light on the key stakeholders, would be really beneficial in terms of from a team building perspective.
Wow, that's fascinating. And you know what? This is a perfect segue because Jeff and I created Casually Pro because we wanted to find really interesting people with skills that might be transferable between one area to another and introduce them to a wider audience so that everyone can learn and everyone can take something from this to apply in their daily lives or in their careers. Uh, and with that in mind, Chelsea, I want to ask, what's one skill that you found in maybe your day job in data analytics or in building DIMSUMX or both even, uh, that would help someone figure out how to do what you did?
Yeah, I think I would say is I call it care. Maybe that's a word. I don't know if it's a skills or not, but I feel like if you have to be interchangeable between different things that, like for example, what I'm doing, right? Like I mentioned at the beginning too, I feel like doesn't matter what title you are or what position, like you have to care beyond what you're doing. I think that's where the magic would happen. Like for example, I actually I was not used to be a data analyst. This is the funny part. I'm a communication major from college, and I ended up working at MySpace, let's call it. So at MySpace, back then I was a marketing person, and because the fact that I network so much, I think when I say network, I already started networking right back then when I was doing my internship. I would talk to all kinds of people. And from marketing department, I'll talk to like engineering department, HR department, creative department. And then one day my boss was like, Chelsea, you're an intern here. I feel like you know more people than I do. I've worked here for like 4 years. So I think that's the fun part, right? Like I said, I care beyond just what I do. I wonder what Jeff do, what Charles do, what do you guys do in your department? And I kind of carry that, maybe that sort of mentality. Doesn't matter where I go, what company I'm in, I've always wanted to engage beyond just where my current department or what my teams are. Because I wanted to know, oh, how does this ads are created? What is content production, what does that mean? You know, so not just like, oh, I'm looking at my data, all my numbers, that's all I care about. And when you want to make things happen, that's where it will work, because you need to talk to different parts of people, because you're not just operate in a vacuum. If there's nobody making an ad, I don't have data to analyze because the ad is not available, right? So that's how you have to think beyond just like what you do in front of you. And same thing for DIMSUMX. It's like, if I only care about me having dim sum, but oh, how would Charles wanted to, you know, eat what kind of food, what kind of tea was he like to drink, you know? So I feel like that's the amount of care it will kind of carry you into maybe having fun, but then also make things easier in your life and also make it more fun as well. So
Wow, this is so powerful. Who you're listening to this, I know that this is not what you do. And I strongly advise you to go back 3 minutes when Chelsea started this answer to this question, listen again and apply what she just said starting tomorrow. Guaranteed it will change your life. Chelsea, now I'd like to ask you a question that we ask all of our guests. It's a special moment. I will hand you the magic microphone. Magic microphone is magic because it allows you to speak to absolutely everyone on Earth. Everyone who's alive today, but also those who will be in the future generations. You have 2 minutes to share a universal message with them. What is it?
all right, pick my word. Invisible mic. So I would say, start a network without wanting to get something back from other people. I feel like I want to emphasize this so much. It's like when you go network, just don't think about take, but think about give. Like, how can I help the other person? And surprisingly or not, I think good things will be in return without you asking for it. If you really genuinely wanted to help others, others will want to return that favor and reciprocate it, and you'll get what you want. So I feel like I want to encourage more people out there just to go network, not for the sake of networking for, oh, I need to find a job, I need to do X, Y, and Z, but say, what do other people need? Let me come help you with. So that's what I would like to share and make it, you know, more aware for more people. So thank you for this opportunity.
Incredible. Chelsea, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an incredible pleasure. I think all of us have learned how to make things a little bit easier for everyone, but also how to connect on a deeper level. And I think that's something the world needs a little bit more of. For everyone listening, thank you so much. Make sure to like, subscribe, give us 5 stars, send it to a friend. Maybe check out your DIMSUMX in your nearest local city. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.